All right, so today we're telling the story of a guy who wrote a little piece of software, just for fun, and he ended up completely changing the world. This is the story of Linus Torvalds, the accidental revolutionary. So, let me ask you something. Think about the tech you use every single day. Your phone, if it's an Android, the servers that run giants like Google and Facebook, even the absolute fastest supercomputers on the planet. They all seem completely different, right? But it turns out they all share a kind of digital DNA, a common ancestor that you can trace all the way back to just one person. And that's the part that is just so incredible. This stuff, the foundation of our modern world, it wasn't cooked up in some giant corporate lab with a billion-dollar budget. Nope. It was a hobby project, started by a university student in Finland who literally said he was just messing around.
And here he is. This is the guy, Linus Torvalds. He created the Linux kernel, which is the absolute core of the operating system that powers, well, so much of everything now. But to really get the scale of his impact, we gotta go back, way back to the beginning.
So let's trace this whole thing. How exactly does a kid in Helsinki, playing on a home computer, end up kicking off a global tech revolution? To really get a sense of who he is, you have to start with his name. So, on one hand, he was named after Linus Pauling, a double Nobel Prize-winning chemist. Pretty serious stuff. But he insists he was equally named after Linus from the Peanuts cartoon. He even says this makes him half Nobel Prize-winning chemist and half blanket-carrying cartoon character. And honestly, that mix of pure genius and playful, kind of nerdy humor, that's a theme you're going to see again and again. And the speed that this all happened at is just staggering. I mean, look at this. He gets his first computer when he's 11. Just a decade later, he buys a brand new PC with this powerful Intel 386 chip. And he basically looks at the operating systems available and says, nah, these aren't good enough. So he just starts building his own. And get this, by the end of that same year, he already has early versions of Linux up online for anyone to see. Here's another piece of that whole accidental story for you. He didn't even want to call it Linux. His name, the one he came up with, was Freaks. Like a mashup of free, freak, and X for Unix-like systems. But the friend who set up the server for him just thought Freaks sounded weird. So he just named the folder Linux. And, well, the name just stuck.
So the big question is, how does a student's little hobby project with a name he didn't even pick become this global phenomenon that basically runs the modern internet? Well, it all came down to a few key decisions that turned a one-man show into a worldwide revolution.
Okay, so a few things happened that changed everything. First, Torvalds goes to a talk by the founder of the free software movement, Richard Stallman, and gets totally inspired. This leads him to make a crucial move. He switches the license to something called the GNU GPL. And what that meant was that anyone, anywhere, could use his code, change it, and even sell it, as long as they kept their own changes open source too. That one move unlocked its commercial potential, and suddenly, companies like Red Hat popped up to build businesses on top of his work. And just like that, a global community of developers started pitching in, making it better every single day. And the results were, well, explosive. By 1999, two of these companies, Red Hat and VA Linux, gave him some stock options just to say thanks. Then they went public right at the peak of the dot-com boom, and his shares were briefly worth around $20 million. Yeah, not a bad return for a project he started just for fun.
But all this success created a massive new problem. I mean, think about it. You've got thousands of people all over the planet trying to contribute code to your project. How in the world do you manage all that? Well, this new challenge led directly to his second world-changing invention.
The software they were using to manage all the code changes, a tool called BitKeeper, was proprietary. The relationship with the company that made it completely fell apart, and the whole Linux project was suddenly at risk. So what does Linus do? He does the most Linus thing possible. He just disappears for a couple of weeks and builds his own tool from scratch. He called it Git, and today Git is the undisputed global standard for version control. It's used by millions of developers for basically every project imaginable. He solved his own problem, and in doing so, he ended up solving it for everybody else too.
So, we've got the software, but what about the man himself? Because building a massive community isn't just about writing good code, it's about people. And Linus Torvalds' personality is a huge and often really controversial part of the whole story. He is famously, and I mean brutally, direct.
There's this legendary moment from a public talk back in 2012. Someone in the audience asked him about the graphics card company NVIDIA and why their support for Linux was so bad. And his response was, well, let's just say it was very blunt, very shocking, and it was pure, unfiltered Linus Torvalds.
But what's really fascinating is how self-aware he is about it all. He knows his style is abrasive. He said before that he'd like to be a nice person who encourages people, but it's just not in his nature. He sees being blunt as just being efficient and clear, even if it ruffles more than a few feathers along the way.
This all kind of came to a head in 2018. After years of criticism for his really harsh communication style online, he actually stepped away from the project for a bit. He put out this public apology for his behavior, admitting he'd hurt people's feelings, and announced he was taking some time to, get this, get some help understanding people's emotions. It was a pretty stunning moment of self-reflection from one of the most famously difficult personalities in all of tech.
So after everything, the code, the community, the controversy, what's his ultimate legacy? When you boil it all down, what did he truly build?
Well, check this out. If you look at all the code that makes up the Linux kernel today, Linus Torvalds himself has written only about 2% of it. Just 2%. And that's when it hits you. His greatest invention wasn't just a piece of software, it was a system for working together. He created a platform that allowed tens of thousands of developers to build something that no single person or even a single company could ever have built alone.
These days, he's not spending most of his time writing code anymore. He's the manager, the gatekeeper. People famously call him the benevolent dictator for life. His job is to review the code that everyone else submits and be the final authority on what actually makes it into the official Linux kernel. He's the one who maintains the vision and protects the quality of this massive global project.
And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. Linus Torvalds gave the world two incredible, revolutionary pieces of software, Linux and Git. But maybe, just maybe, his greatest contribution was pioneering this whole open-source collaborative way of building things in the first place. So what do you think? Was the bigger revolution the software he made, or the way he enabled all of us to make things together?